When River last saw the doctor, before they departed, she mentioned that she'd see him again when the Pandorica opens. There's that word again, Pandorica. And the doctor says it's just a fairy tale, but then again, a guy who flits around time and space with a box that's bigger on the inside than it is on the outside, that's kind of fairy tale-ish on its own right. Oh well. On to the next adventure. Because the doctor really doesn't want to screw up his relationship with Amy and her new guy, Rory. After she kisses him, he quickly heads back to the present at the time and crashes Rory's bachelor party and informs him about Amy's potential infidelity. So, as an apology, he takes them both on a vacation to sort of rekindle the magic. They head to Venice during the late 1500s, I believe. They get accosted by some bureaucrat who's trying to screen people for plague. Apparently, the city is quarantined. I know the feeling. And with a bit of flim-flam from the psychic paper, they suddenly have the run of the place. But all is not as it seems, because this boat builder is trying to get his daughter back from a very prestigious school. One so prestigious that families are no longer allowed to see the daughters that get accepted. And when he tries looking among the veiled girls as they go for their morning constitutional, one of them bears sharp, vampire-like teeth at him after he finds his daughter, but she reacts like he's something of a stranger. So the doctor decides to investigate. He finds out about the school and the fact that the matron of the school has put the city into quarantine to avoid plague, even though it's supposedly died out already. At least for now. And he talks about what he saw on that one girl's face. So Amy, Rory, and the doctor decide to investigate. The doctor uses a distraction in the form of the boat builder desperately clawing at the front gate to use the back door entrance and meets some of the girls who have sharp teeth and don't show up in a mirror, and they're very pale and they don't like sunlight. You see where this is going? There are vampires in Venice, and the proof is in the pudding, because while Amy and Rory are exploring, they come across a male vampire attempting to feed on a young woman. Luckily, she's not completely drained, so she'll be okay. And so the four of them decide to further infiltrate the facility and have Amy pose as a potential student, with Rory as her brother. And there's a bit of comedy over the fact that Amy is less like a fiancé and more like a brother to Amy. And did I say Rory? Yeah, Rory. And the doctor is more like Amy's fiancé. We also find out that due to some of the boat builder's work, he's got a stock of gunpowder. Like actual classic gunpowder. And everyone keeps the candles as far away from possible, as far away as possible from the barrels of gunpowder. So, while Amy goes to unlock a tunnel entrance, the Doctor and Rory infiltrate from the rear again and talk about more of Amy's infidelity, and it was the fact that her adrenaline was up so high due to being on those previous adventures. And if Rory had been there, oh boy, you couldn't have pried them apart with a crowbar. Unfortunately, after Amy unlocks the tunnel entrance, she gets taken to a room where they partially drain her and prepare to inject her with some of their blood, which, as you know from the classic vampire stories, causes a transformation. We also find the daughter of the boat builder, who's not fully transformed, but enough that when Amy kicks something on the matron's belt and it malfunctions, we see her for what she truly is. Some sort of alien fish creature. So not technically a vampire, but an alien fish monster. Anyway, surprisingly, the daughter helps Amy escape once the room where Amy is being held is emptied temporarily, and all of our heroes hook up and try to leave before the school is sealed electronically. But the daughter, being too far gone, is unable to tolerate sunlight, and she gets pulled back in. And then the Doctor gets zapped within an inch of his life when they electronically seal the place up. And unfortunately, while they're convalescing at the boat builder's place to try and figure out what their next move is, the daughter gets pushed into the river by the matron and her son, the male vampire. And at first she's very cocky because she can swim. She'll just swim to the other shore. Only there are things in the water. 10,000 of the matron's other sons, who are trained to eat humanoids. So yeah, she's dead. And later, the potential mates of the 10,000 sons, the girls who are too far gone, who are no longer willing to help because they're fully transformed, well, they attack the boat builder's place, and knowing that his daughter is gone, he makes the ultimate sacrifice to destroy some of the evil and avenge his daughter's death. So now it's up to Amy, Rory, and the Doctor to finally put an end to the vampire threat. The Doctor finds out that there's an electronic control system built into the matron's throne in her throne room, as if she were a queen. And we later find out that it's part of a weather control device to blot out the sun and flood Venice. The plan was, after the matron and her sons escape from their dying homeworld through a crack in reality, avoiding the silence, whatever that is. Her plan was to breed mates for her sons using vampiric blood, her blood, and then fled Venice so they would be able to live there instead of going somewhere into the abyss. But eventually the Doctor, Amy, and Rory managed to break enough items and stop the final plan of the vampires once and for all. And while Rory gets attacked by the male vampire after Rory insults the guy's mom, which is something you never do, period, Amy manages to blow him up with a bit of reflected sunlight. And with her main son dead and all her potential daughters dead, and her perception filter still malfunctioning and locked into the human setting, which is what Amy kicked, she decides to go out on her own terms. One last middle finger to the Doctor, who refused to help her. She jumps into the water and lets her own sons consume her. After that, who knows what happens to them? Do they die quickly, or do they die after years of living in the abyss? One thing's for sure, you do not want to swim in the waters of Venice, at least for a couple of centuries. But with the day saved, Amy, with her spaceship and her boys, depart Venice and go off to new adventures. Cut to 5 years later, Amy and Rory have settled in a small village, Upper Ledworth. Rory's got a mullet with a ponytail. Amy's about to give birth. And the Doctor cannot believe just how boring that little town is. But then, for some reason, after some shrill birds chirp, they all fall asleep and wake up back on the TARDIS as it gets steadily colder. And soon they find out why it's getting steadily colder. They're headed towards a cold sun, which, instead of burning, it's freezing. Well, there is such a thing as cold fusion, in theory. It's not quite on this big a scale. And to make matters worse, the TARDIS keeps malfunctioning to the point where it shuts down. And eventually they keep hearing the shrill birds and fall asleep again and wake up back in Ledworth. Eventually they meet this little fella who calls himself the Dream Lord, but I got a sneaking suspicion he's the celestial toy maker, messing with the Doctor and his companions once again. And he proposes a challenge. One of those realities, Upper Ledworth or the freezing TARDIS, is a dream. And if you die in a dream, you don't die in real life. So you gotta choose which dream is real and which dream is one you can safely die in. And to compound the threat, back in Ledworth, it seems all the old people have become possessed by an alien species that fled its homeworld, much like the fish vampires. But because they were humiliated when they were forced to become refugees, they decided to take their frustrations out on the human population, exhaling a vapor that turns people to dust like that. So it's up to the Doctor, Amy, and Rory to save as many people as possible after seeing a whole field formerly occupied by children, now occupied by dust. Horrible. They have to stop the aliens and save the day, or they have to figure out a way to jumpstart the TARDIS and get away from the freezing sun. Pick your poison. For a while, Amy gets separated from the Doctor and Rory, and the Dream Lord messes with her head, trying to get her to choose between the Doctor and Rory. The dopey physician, or the time-traveling superhero. Practically a no-brainer. But Amy does make her choice eventually, after the three of them get back together. Rory takes a face full of the alien vapor and turns to dust in front of Amy. And she makes the call. She's going to plow the Doctor and herself into the nearest heavy structure using a vehicle without seatbelts. Because otherwise she'll have to exist in a world without Rory, and that's a world she doesn't want to exist in. She's made her choice. So, bam! They crash the car and wake up in the freezing TARDIS. And the Dream Lord admits defeat and starts pulling the ship away from the freezing sun to slowly warm the place up and get things going again. But then the Doctor calls his bluff. He puts the TARDIS on overload and kills himself, Amy and Rory, who woke up along with them a second ago, because it turns out both realities were dreams. And when they wake up for real this time, the Doctor presents a bit of psychic pollen that they must have picked up on a previous adventure that was stuck inside the TARDIS console all this time, until it fed off of the Doctor's worst aspects and produced the Dream Lord. And even after blowing the pollen out of the TARDIS door, he sees a vision of the Dream Lord and wonders what kind of person he really is. On to the next adventure. They decide to go to Rio de Janeiro. Unfortunately, they are off by a few thousand kilometers and end up in a little village in Britain, and possibly Scotland, in the year 2020. And apparently it was just before COVID struck, because no one is sheltering in place and no one is wearing a mask. You gotta love references to 2020 before actual 2020. But it seems the TARDIS brought them here for a good reason. It seems the humans delved too greedily and too deep with their massive drill that got them 21,000, I believe, kilometers beneath the surface of the Earth. People start vanishing, and one hapless sod gets sucked into the Earth itself. But before the Doctor, Amy, and Rory realize what's going on, they get a brief visit from Amy and Rory, who came to this spot at this time the long way around, casually waving to each other from across a long field. Which is an interesting little nod to the idea that you could potentially meet yourself. Although the Doctor warns against it. He does not need more time bats eating people. Eventually, Rory is misidentified as a police officer and shown some empty graves that have apparently been emptied from underneath. And eventually, the culprit makes themselves known by throwing up a shield around the drill and the little village around it, and putting up a darkness filter to turn day into night. And we find out after Amy is sucked into the earth, after protecting an old man who was about to get sucked into the earth, and the old man's grandson gets taken by someone in a lizard-like mask. The Doctor realizes that the Silurians have returned. Only this isn't the Silurians that we're used to seeing. For one thing, they have actual facial movements. They're a slightly different breed, but yeah, they are Silurians. And instead of biomechanical devices in their foreheads for defense, they have venomous tongues. The only caveat being that they can only tongue someone once every 24 hours. And the Doctor and Rory are lucky enough to capture one. And they sort of interrogate her. She informs them that the attack was propagated by their drilling. And so the lady in charge and the old man, who is one of the technicians, finds out that they accidentally disturbed these ancient owners of the earth. And the Silurian lady is cheesed. She insults them all at every turn. And she insists the Earth belongs to the Silurians, even though they haven't been the owners of the planet since they screwed up and mistook the moon for an incoming space rock, which would have completely obliterated Earth anyway, so going underground would have been pointless. Anywho, the Doctor, seeing an opportunity for peace, offers an exchange. The female warrior for everyone who was taken. While the lizard lady doesn't like the idea because she's very, very militant and very, very stupid, the Doctor makes a plan to head down to the Silurian colony and make the trade. And when he and the lady in charge of the drill head down there, they find a massive colony, like probably enough to populate Britain itself. So after the lady and the Doctor and the TARDIS get pulled down to the Silurian colony, the Doctor asks for a parley, which includes a scientist who was examining the humans and apparently dissected the guy from earlier, who happens to be this one lady's husband, a different lady, the mother of the little boy who also got taken, and the daughter, or should I say son-in-law, of the old man. He gets dissected and put back together, but it wasn't a very easy process. Luckily, Amy was able to pick the pocket of the scientist and free herself and the guy, and so she and he are there too. At first, they start a Mexican standoff, but Amy just doesn't have it in her to kill someone, so she gets disarmed easily. But since both sides have hostages, the doctor asks for parley. But since the sister of the lizard lady who was kidnapped is there, and just as militant and just as stupid, she plans to just kill them all. So the scientist quickly unfreezes everyone's boss, basically the Prime Minister of the Silurians, to pull rank and maybe get her to behave. So the parley starts. The Silurians offer technology, the humans offer the parts of the Earth that are a little too hot for us, but perfect for the Silurians, who are cold-blooded. Unfortunately, back on the surface, there's a wrinkle. The lizard lady from before, she tongued the old man who's slowly mutating and potentially dying. And she says she's not going to cure him. Furthermore, she goads the guy's daughter over the fact that her son and husband are missing, presumed dead, and that her father is slowly dying. And goads the poor woman into tasing the Silurian woman, despite the fact that the doctor insisted they put away all their weapons. Because earlier she got some blunt instruments and even a shotgun. And he said, no weapons. And the woman didn't listen. And as it turns out, Silurians are a little more sensitive to tasers than humans are. Instead of getting stunned, she dies. And when the humans on the surface are sent to bring the Silurian lady back, the truth is revealed. And any potential peace is destroyed. The Silurian Prime Minister, he sees that humans aren't ready for contact with their Earth cousins, and the Silurian lady sister is ticked and refuses to see reason. In fact, she kills the scientist after unfreezing some of her warriors to start the war anew, just like the Silurians back in the day. And it doesn't help that the doctor mentioned that the first Silurians that he encountered as the third doctor were destroyed by a unit. So, with only the Silurian Prime Minister on their side, the doctor realizes that the only way to get her to stop would be to start a decontamination procedure that will poison anyone not inside a cryopod to get the warrior woman and all her forces to stand down. Meanwhile, the Prime Minister releases the before he died, the scientist released the kid. So all the humans are in one place, and the doctor. And when the doctor realizes the old man has been poisoned, he surmises that the Silurian technology can decontaminate him, but not before the drill that is still functioning gets pre-programmed to puncture into the life support systems of the Silurians. Yeah, you really don't want to mess with a mother, because they can get crazy. Although she does show remorse for her actions. So, everyone's got to get to the surface and stop the drill. The Doctor proposes a feedback loop which should destroy it, and the woman in charge of the drill is okay, because she's not leaving the Silurian colony. See, it turns out there's not enough time to decontaminate the old man. He's got to be frozen and decontaminated later, and she decides to stay with him because they're in love. And the Doctor proposes to the Prime Minister that if the humans here now witnessing the event can get it into the collective human mind that the Silurians can live in peace with them, that by the year 3000, hopefully the Silurians can be unthawed and take their place back on the surface. And that's where the old man and his new girlfriend are going, the future, the long way around, using the cryopods. So, the Doctor, Amy, Rory, and the family that we've gotten to know over the course of the adventure pile into the TARDIS, but not before the crack in reality reappears, wider. And it's just Amy, Rory, and the Doctor outside the TARDIS, so they're the only ones who witness it. And the Doctor surmises that this crack was started by an explosion sometime in the future. And he realizes that where there's an explosion, there's shrapnel. So he does the impossibly stupid thing of reaching directly into the crack and pulling out a piece of shrapnel that he's wrapped in a handkerchief. But before they all get back in the TARDIS, turns out the surviving warrior sister, who allowed herself to be poisoned, plans to end the Doctor once and for all with her dying breath. Only Rory takes the shot and dies in Amy's arms. Add to that, the light from the crack starts touching and absorbing him, and it's too late to even rescue his body. The Doctor forcibly pulls Amy into the TARDIS and gets a move on. And despite his efforts, she forgets him, as if he was never born. Back on the surface, they witness the drill blowing up and saving the Silurians. And while eventually, in the year 3000 something, the Silurians do re-emerge and peace is assured, the Prime Minister, in a speech that he gives to the audience, tells that the Doctor suffered a loss, and Rory was that loss. Because this time when the Doctor and Amy look across the ravine, they see past Amy alone. And the Doctor realizes he screwed up big time, so he treats Amy like he's never treated her before. Oh, and before I get into this, he also notices that the shrapnel is a piece of the TARDIS. So whatever has torn apart reality, it has to do with the TARDIS. But enough of that. After going to various places in time. They visit a museum with Vincent van Gogh's paintings all around. And yes, I know how to pronounce Van Gogh's name, but I can't make my throat do that, so I'm just calling him Van Gogh. The Doctor notices something odd about one of the paintings, a church, which seems to have a monster inside it. So he decides to take the TARDIS and Amy back to when Van Gogh made that painting. Less than a year before he offed himself, sadly. And we find Van Gogh trying to trade what would be priceless paintings, but are currently basically garbage paintings, for a drink. So they cozy up to him, and they ask about whether or not he's maybe seen something. But then they're interrupted by someone or something attacking a poor young girl and killing her. A stone's throw from the cafe where they're convalescing. And when the trio decide to check things out, the mother of the poor girl starts freaking out and blaming Van Gogh for no good reason other than she needs someone to blame, and mob mentality takes over, and the trio get chased out of town. So they convalesce at Van Gogh's house. And while talking about stuff, seems Amy has an encounter with the creature, only she gets knocked over. And when the Doctor and Van Gogh go to investigate, Van Gogh actually sees the beast. He tries to fight it, but it's too big, and the Doctor and his blind attacks fail to stop it. But it does run off eventually. And Van Gogh paints a picture of the beast, which resembles a sort of bird. Luckily, the Doctor takes something from his TARDIS that apparently was a gift and rigs up a device to see the creature, utilizing doohickeys and a mirror. And it works, and the Doctor is nearly killed. So their plan is to go to the church and hope that the beast shows up eventually. Unfortunately, Van Gogh's mental condition, which manifested earlier as manic rant about how he can hear colors, which was fueled by coffee, he hits the other end of the spectrum, a low. The Doctor finds him in his bed sobbing, and Van Gogh becomes hostile and tells the Doctor to leave him be. But about 5 minutes later, when Amy and the Doctor get set to head out for the beast hunt, Van Gogh is ready, willing, and able. And on the way there, passing the funeral procession of that poor girl from earlier, he talks about how his condition makes him aware of such things in other people. Like Amy, for instance. He can tell that she's hiding some secret pain. She's even crying without realizing it. And the Doctor knows why. Eventually they get to the church, and Van Gogh starts painting, and they find that the creature is in the building. At first, the Doctor is the only one in there trying to make contact, because it could potentially be intelligent. And he finds out that the creature is a scavenger, usually travels in packs, but When one of them falls behind, they're left behind, and he can't figure out why this one fell behind. Then Amy shows up, trying to help the doctor, and they get stuck in a confessional and nearly get shish kebabbed. And finally, Vincent goes in and risks changing history by getting his life cut short, because his last year was his greatest year when it came to his art production. But eventually, Vincent's able to subdue the creature with the pointy end of his easel. Unfortunately, the blow was mortal. And we find out that the reason the creature fell behind was because it was stricken blind. And it sadly died afraid. But the doctor and Vincent and Amy are able to soothe it in its last moments. And eventually, after they leave the church, Vincent lays them all out on the grass and has them look up at the sky to describe how he sees things. And it's just like the night sky that he painted. And to return the favor, the doctor takes Van Gogh to the gallery in the future and asks one of the tour guides there what kind of person Van Gogh was, and the guy just gushes about him. And it's a really emotional moment. Van Gogh cries tears of joy, thanks the tour guide without revealing his true self, and the trio head back to the past. And Van Gogh, full of renewed life, goes off to do more paintings and make his mark on history. Unfortunately, when the doctor and Amy head once again back to the gallery in the future, Amy expects there to be more paintings, only there aren't. He's still offed himself at 37. But there are a few subtle changes. The bird creature is no longer in the church, and the famous painting of sunflowers, which Van Gogh was originally reluctant to paint, now bear a dedication to Amy from Vincent. And the doctor lays out some truth. It's not how long you live, it's the quality of life. And despite Van Gogh's mental illness, that little jaunt with the doctor and Amy helped ensure that Van Gogh had a decent quality of life before the end. And that's where we must end it for now. Next, the doctor and Amy face their final test this season when the Pandorica finally opens. Until then, this is Mr. J signing out and reminding you, art is subjective, and you should definitely support your local artists, because you never know when one of them might make their mark on history with just a few brushstrokes. Cheers.